Welcome to Top City Today. I'm Trey McPherson. With us today is Spencer Duncan. He's running for Topeka City Council, District 8. Welcome, Spencer.
Hello, thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
Yes, it's a pleasure to have you. So tell us about yourself.
Well, that could take a while. Actually, the thing about running for office is I don't like talking about myself, but you sort of have to. It's sort of a weird thing when it's not your comfort zone. But nonetheless, I'm a native Topekan, lifelong, born and raised here in the city. In fact, I am now running in the district in which I was born and raised and have lived primarily most of my life. So it's kind of an odd bookend. You're born in one district and now you're running for office to represent everyone. My wife and I, we have a 6-year-old, we now live in the district. And so that's kind of fun. And there's still people still live in that district that I knew growing up, which is great. But so that's the short version. My day job is I do association management and government affairs work. So I represent various groups across the state, both small business and nonprofits. So I have some experience there and working, kind of seeing not just what's happening in Topeka, but sort of a statewide version of what, look at what's going on. And so that's the very short version. I can always go more in depth, but that's who I am in a nutshell.
So what drove you specifically to run for city council? Was there some event that prompted you, I'm going to run for city council?
Yeah, I have no desire to be a politician. Even though part of my day job involves working with politicians and legislators, that's not what I want to be. I don't have aspirations of, if I could become a city council person today, I can be something later on. Being a lifer who's now raising a family here, who has a business here, whose wife has a business here, I just see things we need to do better. Now, when you run for office, you talk about the negatives or the things that need fixed a lot, because that's what people want to talk about. I always try to preface it by reminding people there is a lot of good in this city. It is a great city. We just don't talk about a lot of that when you're campaigning, because people want to talk about all things they're mad about or frustrated about or upset about. And so that tends to be where the conversation goes. But I also like to remind people there's so much good here. But yeah, my frustration is watching us do things the same way over and over again, hoping we get better results. We're watching economic issues and infrastructure issues and outward migration. And as someone who's lived here for the majority of my life, I'm looking here saying, why aren't we doing what some of these other cities are doing that are attracting people? And why are we keep doing things this way? I can't change it overnight, but I'd like to have a larger input and voice into that system.
All right. Well, unfortunately, we do have to talk about issues.
Right. No, issues are good.
So what are the top 3 issues that you feel are facing Topeka?
So outward migration, infrastructure, and public safety. You can put them in whatever order you want, okay? You can shuffle them anytime. Yeah. The outward migration is obviously, we've been losing population for a decade. That has to stop, because every time someone leaves, it's not just that we lose good people who better the community, we lose their tax revenue, which helps us pay for other problems, including infrastructure and public safety. Mm-hmm. So we have to look at, through how we look at issues, what keeps people here, what brings them here. Now that's kind of a big umbrella, but at least it's a specific prism to say, okay, let's look at every issue through that. How do we keep people and stop people from moving? The second is we have infrastructure issues. Obviously, roads is a big one people talk about, but it's also sidewalks, and it's also making sure we have a lot of old water mains out there. How are we going to pay for those as they break over the next 2 decades, and are we ready for that? And then public safety. I would say everyone should be able to feel like they're walking down the street next to a police officer, right? So that they always feel safe. And I don't think a lot of Topekans feel that way every day. And so we've got to focus. I think if we focus on those 3, and I think those are the big 3 people want to talk about when I'm walking doors and talking to people.
Mm-hmm. We talk about the police issue. Let's go over, we've heard people complain sometimes about the response times. Is that something that you're concerned about with the police and the safety issue?
Mostly what I hear is not related to the response. It's in terms of like actual response time. It's more relationships with the officers, and it's follow-up on the cases. And I don't think that all of those issues are specifically fall on the officers. It's like any issue. There's both sides that need to do better. And I've talked with the police chief personally about, hey, how can I help you as officers reach into the community better if I was elected? And what are some things that you need to do that? And we've had that conversation. And I do think Chief Cochran has done better than previous chiefs on that. Improvements can be made, but he's making some strides. I think then it says, if you're elected as an official, what is your role in that? And I think your role is making sure people have a voice in that process. How do I, as someone who's elected, make sure that the police and the citizens can sit down and have a better relationship? Then I think the follow-up issues sometimes, if you ask the department, they're understaffed. And part of that's a budget issue. I mean, it's very much a where are we going to find dollars for that? And part of it's some constraints they have. And one of the controversial issues is, should we allow people who are police officers to live outside the city of Topeka? That failed recently by a vote of 5-5 by the city council. I think if you talk to them, I want everyone who works here and gets paid by taxpayer dollars to live here, but I also think when it comes to public safety, if the officers and firefighters of this city are telling me, I can recruit somebody who lives a county over but has a kid in high school and they really want to work here and they would be a great officer, but they don't want to move till their kid graduates high school, I am willing to say, I want the best officer to work here until their kid graduates and they can move here. And I think those are the issues that we have failed to address by, that they tell us would help all of these situations. Recruiting better people, being able to have the best police force and best firefighters that we can.
Mm-hmm. And with your issue on making sure that people aren't leaving, part of that comes with jobs and comes with skilled workers. What are your avenues of attack in trying to resolve that problem?
Washburn Tech has been a good start. It's given us another avenue to train people and educate people in some of those jobs over on another part of town. But we have to go a lot farther than that. We need to take some of those economic development dollars that we're spending to recruit and put it into actual training. Because one of the top concerns we have heard when, say, a company of 300 to 500 wants to move here, whether it's a factory or something, we have incentives. We have economic incentives. That's not an issue. They say, Topeka's got great incentives. What they then say is, what is your quality of life? What are your schools like? What is your arts and entertainment like? And they say, what is your workforce like? And we have got to be able to show them we have a workforce. You will be able to find 500 people in this community who can be trained and transported to you to work. And we've done better because we have had some companies we've recruited, but we haven't done enough. And we have to specifically bring in some folks who understand that and say, institute these programs, you will recruit those big jobs.
More recently in the news, the Topeka Rescue Mission has been in financial trouble. What are your thoughts on assisting them?
Well, we can't afford to lose them because the services they offer, no one else offers. But I think two things of note. First of all, if they're going to have a crisis like they did, they need to talk to the community sooner. And I think Mr. Feeker understands that now and maybe would have done things differently. But I think that has sort of shaken people a little as to why did you wait so long to let the community know there were some issues there. The second thing is, and they have got to show the community that this isn't going to be the same situation a year from now. That's easier said than done. There's no magic bullet. But I think people are more willing to give money to them at this point as long as they say, okay, you got here, it happens, the services you offer are vital, but what's the plan? What's the 5-year plan to make sure that we're not having this conversation 6 months from now? And again, I think they're working on that, but I think there's got to be a solid foundation there because they've made it clear they will not take city dollars. So if I sat here and said the city should help fund them, they're not going to take those dollars, and that's fine. I think the city can do some other things to help with homelessness and low-income assistance programs, but yeah, we've got to see a long-term plan from the rescue mission.
If the rescue mission ends up being in this same place again, would you end up advocating for a organization to replace them that's run by the city or a partnership with the county? What would you do if we ended up not having the rescue mission because it's in this place again?
Sure. Well, it's not going to be good for government, period, to get into running a homeless shelter. I guess that's the short way to put it. I think you've got to rely on social services. I think if we lose something like the rescue mission or have to start looking at alternatives, I think then you have to look at the networks that already exist because there are other organizations not doing the same level of housing and jobs, but there are in terms of providing food and clothing and assistance of various kinds. What does that network look like? How can we better work as a city to bring them together into a hub? then find out what resources each of them need so we're not duplicating services, and then you develop a plan as a city that says, okay, I don't need to reinvent the wheel. I have that in the community. They're doing this, they're doing this, they're doing this. Now, let's see if we can help them with this and them with this. I think just saying, well, let's start something new, which does tend to happen a lot. Hey, let's start something new. That sounds great. It leads you down that where you're now fighting for the same resources when we already have resources we can all rely on. So I think that would be the backup plan. Look at what we have and bring them together.
All right. That's a really good answer. Thank you. So this is not the first time that you've run for office.
No.
What we've been asking candidates is, what do you enjoy about campaigning?
Oh, I love talking to people. My first job, my first love, I guess, was I graduated from the University of Kansas with degrees in journalism and English. I later went on and got a master's in business, but I was a journalist for a decade, both here in Kansas and in North Carolina, Texas for a little bit. So part of the reason I loved doing that was you get to go out and you talk to people and you would do stories and you get to write about all these different people you meet all the time. And a lot of that transports into campaigning. You're out there, you're knocking on doors, you're hearing from people. And I think something, and this is an unfair blanket because we have 10 elected people on the council, and this doesn't apply to all of them, okay? So if there's someone out there who does this, it's not towards you. But there's a few who I think don't listen enough or talk enough to constituents. And it's not just about, I represent you, therefore I should do what you say. It is about understanding that people have good ideas. I don't know everything. I don't think I know everything. And I always say I never want to be the smartest guy in the room. Then you're in the wrong room, right? I want better people with good ideas with me, helping me, guiding me. And I think that's when you have, the only way you get that is if you've got a city of 100,000 plus people, there's going to be a few ideas beyond the 10 elected people, okay? So let's listen to your constituents because they may change your mind. They're going to bring good ideas forward. And so I love having that dialogue. Now, sometimes you're going to disagree with them, and you're going to say to them, I think you're wrong on this one. I'm going to vote this way or do this way. But if you have those constructive conversations, then on the next issue, that same person who thought you were an idiot for that vote is at least going to know they can come talk with you, and you might be smart on the next vote, right? You're only as smart as your last vote if you're elected. But I do think that's a component of it. Talking with people. I just like that, like doing that and being out with other folks in Topeka.
So on the population loss issue, what do you think is causing that? And what can we do to keep people here?
Part of it's perception and part of it's reality, right? You gotta love that answer. That's like
that's the best answer.
Yeah, right. It's everything, right? So the perception part is we do need to improve public safety, as we've talked about. It also gets overblown sometimes, right? But I think there is a safety issue if you talk to folks who say, oh, well, Topeka's not safe. Statistically, we're not that much different than a lot of the states. So if you're moving from Topeka to Lawrence to Manhattan or Kansas City, guess what? The crime rates are about the same. So it's a statewide issue as much as it is a city. Doesn't mean we need to do better. We want those numbers below everybody. But the point is, we're not more unsafe than some other, but there's a perception out there. I think that we've got to improve the activities and things for people to do. And we always talk about that, and we always have people working on that. But I'm not sure we always listen to what the people tell us. I think we've done multiple studies through the years that we've either gotten offended when they've criticized us, and so we put them in the drawer because they said something negative about us. Well, you paid them a lot of money to tell you what to do, and then we sort of veer from it. Well, let's stop veering from the actual input that these studies tell us and what the people tell us, and actually do what they say and listen to them instead of what person X decided was a great pet project, right? I am president currently of the board of the Topeka Performing Arts Center. And one of the things we've worked on, we get some city support. Now, that building's owned by the city, so it's a little different than its own private entity. But the city has dropped their support over the years. And I keep telling them, when you do that in the main performing arts facility in our city, which you own, you're only hurting the community. Right? And I understand people want those tax dollars to go to some other places, but that's a $7 million economic revenue driver over there, believe it or not. Let's invest in that and give people more things to do in those facilities. So there's the things to do part of it. There's also a tax issue. We have high sales tax, partly that's the state's fault, not all the city's fault, and we have one of the highest property tax rates in the state of Kansas. So you can't just drop those rates tomorrow. But you have to look at some long-term plans on how to recapture some of those dollars and let people know, hey, it's cheaper to live here than some other communities. The last thing we have to do is we have to advocate for ourselves and let people know what kind of community we are. And I think in this day and age, if you're not an open community and let people know that we're willing to have everybody, one giant tent, come here. We're a very loving sort of community. I think that helps because Kansas, as a general rule, unfair or not, has a bad perception of what kind of state we are. And I think Topeka can be a beacon of difference in that perception to say people, this is where you want to be. This is the kind of city you want to live in. So it's all of those factors. There's not one magic bullet that's going to bring thousands of people back. But we do need to look at some of those drivers. And the last one, I guess, is, which we've talked about, we've got to have some economic drivers. We've got to have some big industry. We cannot just keep developing retail